Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Why Agile Fails. Hint, it's more than just process. This is the third and final webinar in Tasktop's Summer of Agile series. And we are delighted to be joined today by the Agile Transformation and DevOps experts, cPrime. My name is Sarah Ryan, and I'm delighted to be the moderator for this webinar. I'm going to do introductions in reverse order. Our second speaker today is Scot Garrison. He is the Director of Professional Services at Tasktop. He brings over 20 years of product management and services experience, and he has, throughout his career, worked in all stages of the product development lifecycle chain, from ideation to execution and delivery. He's spanned industries from payment systems, petroleum, and retail, and we are very glad to have him with us. And to start us off today is Zubin Irani from cPrime. He is the CEO of cPrime, and his background includes a bachelor's degree from USC and an MBA from Columbia and Berkeley. He started his professional career at Deloitte, implementing large, complex IT projects before becoming the youngest director at DirecTV. After a successful tenure, he left to build cPrime, and as the CEO has led the company to 6 consecutive years of top 50 fastest growing companies in the San Francisco Bay Area. So with that, why don't we get started? Zubin?
Thank you, Sarah. And hello, folks. Thanks for joining today. So for those that don't know cPrime, we are one of the largest Agile consulting firms in the country. We are also Atlassian's largest consulting partner by size, implementing Jira, Confluence, Bitbucket, and as Sarah mentioned, we're also very big in the DevOps space with Jenkins and a lot of the build technologies and cloud technologies that are out there. So we'll talk more about that. But I wanted to start with Agile, right? So Agile is very popular, and I tell customers all the time that Agile has crossed the chasm about 3 or 4 years ago. And pretty much Agile is everywhere. In every industry we work with, our financial clients, retail, biotech, entertainment, government, education, it's everywhere, right? And the reason is, it's not because Agile is this amazing, great thing and everyone wants to be Agile. It's because there's a real business need, right? As software eats the world and every company is now a software company, organizations have, to survive, innovate, grow, compete, they've got to keep up with the global market, right? We have competition on a global scale. It's a 24/7 market. It's a different world than it was 10 years ago, than it was 20 years ago, than it was 100 years ago. And we've never had this type of scale or pace of competition in the business world. And that's really just requiring companies to evolve significantly and rely on technology. And as they've turned to technology, they've struggled to be able to get the results they need to keep their business operating and performing and growing. And that's really, that need and that vacuum is what has really pulled Agile in, and why Agile has had such a big impact so quickly in the marketplace. But what's gone wrong? So there's, I go to a lot of conferences, I talk to a lot of different people, I talk to many, many clients. We have at least 100 of the top Fortune 500 as our clients, and we work with about 350 clients a year. We've got a fairly large team, so I get to hear a lot of stories, I get to talk to a lot of customers, I get to go through a lot of experiences. But what's gone wrong? A couple things. Coaching isn't working, right? I think right now coaches are seen as lightweight and ineffective. I would compare it to some of the comments I hear from people are the same comments I heard 10 years ago when people talked about PMPs. Like a PMP doesn't mean you're a good project manager. And right now, people that are calling themselves coaches doesn't mean they're actually good. Companies have made a lot of money investing in and hiring coaches or contracting coaches, but they haven't really seen the results, right? They fork out hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on coaches, and while there might be some, the teams might feel a little bit better about the work they're doing, they're not seeing results in the terms of better software being delivered faster. And these days, everyone's kind of calling themselves a coach, and that's, I think, saturating the market a bit. And it's not that hard for someone to say, look, I've been managing teams, I'm coaching teams, or I was a dev manager, I'm coaching teams, and I was a scrum master, and I'm coaching teams. But that doesn't actually mean they can help an organization deal with some of the key problems that are holding it back from reaching true agility. The industry hasn't evolved, and this is somewhat of a controversial statement, and ironic, of course. But, you know, for years I've been going to the conferences, and to be honest, it's the same topics being talked about by the same people. You know, you've got the selection committee are generally all consultants who make money from selling Agile process consulting. So what you hear is the same type of stuff. And that's actually hindered the industry quite a bit. And I'll use an example of Agile 2016. You look across the agenda for the 3 or 4 day conference, and there's maybe only 5% of the topics even talk about DevOps. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but I mean, one of the things is, to me, DevOps is so critical for an organization to achieve enterprise agility, but yet the most popular conference that happens every year, you know, Agile 2016, isn't talking about it. You know, 5% of the sessions were only talking about DevOps. That should be closer to 50%. And I think that's a problem. And I think it's because a lot of people in the Agile industry that are Agile coaches or that run Agile consulting companies, they don't understand technology well enough. They don't understand DevOps or ALM or how those pieces connect to the process, and therefore they just stay away from it. And they just want to live in their process world. They want to talk about facilitation. They want to talk about teams, which is great, except that doesn't get you to the next level and the next level and the next level beyond that, right? To me, team alignment and defining roles, like that's level 1 of maturity, and that's the first big step you take. And a lot of people have taken that step, and they're still in that place, and no one's taken the next step or the next step beyond that, which I'll talk a little bit about. And I kind of, you know, the fear of technology, right? So coaches that don't know technology can't talk about it. And teams know this, and teams are technical by nature because they're building software, right? You know, end of the day, it's great to tell a team how to collaborate together, but if you don't give them, for instance, if you don't give a distributed team the tools to collaborate together, if you don't show them how they can actually collaborate together, if you can't take that theory and make it tangible for them, it's not going to happen. And if you don't have something to help make it stick, it's also not going to happen. And that's where I think technology can really help process become more sticky and help change become more sticky. And also, you know, initiatives are being run separately. So we see this a lot where, you know, you have an Agile initiative being run by one leader, you have ALM initiative being run by another leader, and then you have a DevOps initiative being run by another leader. So you've got 3 different initiatives being run by 3 different people. The programs are not aligned. They're not even talking to each other. They don't even know what's going on the other side. And I think that's a huge, huge mistake. And part of it's your comfort zone, right? The head of PMO will say, look, I'll take the process side because I know process. The head of development says, I'll take, or the head of testing will say, look, I'll take the testing initiative. The head of ops will say, I'll take the DevOps initiative, or Dev will say, I'll take the build and source code initiative. And there's no coordination between them, right? I mean, organizations live in silos. We know this. We've seen this. And they keep doing that. And as they approach trying to tackle this problem with enterprise agility, they do it in a siloed way. So we have to kind of, that's one of the big issues we just keep seeing over and over again. And we try to tell our clients, you have to look at these initiatives as one big program. And these are parts that all are connected to each other. So how do you know if you're in a failed or failing state? Well, teams adopting Agile stop, slow down, or backtrack, right? Anytime you see reversion, that's the kiss of death for an organization, right? And why that happens is a lack of success allows resistance to grow, right? If you're doing a transformation and you're not having success, what's going to happen is teams will push back, and because there isn't success to counter the pushback, they'll win, and they'll be able to not join the Agile bandwagon, and then you'll see other teams saying, look, facility isn't working for us, let's go back to what we're doing, or let's go modify this and essentially bastardize it and go backwards. And then you start, what really you start seeing is you see Agile champions or coaches start leaving. The good ones do, because they're like, look, I can't be helpful here, or we've lost this battle, or I want to go on to my next gig and spend a year over there trying to do the same thing, which isn't going to work because I'm not doing it right. But those are generally the symptoms we see. Next, we hear a lot is we're sort of doing Agile. And this is a fun one. This is one that interviewees, and I just wrote an article on millennials and Agile and how Agile is so important to attract millennial engineers. But interviewees are trying to figure this out through the process because they know every company says they're Agile, but they're really trying to figure out if they really are Agile. And they generally can figure it out pretty well. If not, within the first 3 months, they realize if they're in an Agile environment or if they're in a kind of a fake Agile environment, or the water scrum or butt ball or whatever you want to call it. So following Scrum ceremonies doesn't mean you're Agile. And saying you're Agile and being Agile are two very different things, right? Third way to tell is this business management aren't seeing results, right? Features really aren't getting built or released much faster. Quality isn't getting any better, and teams aren't collaborating. Dev and QA are still sitting miles apart. Operations is on the other side of the street. No one's really talking or collaborating, and you just have kind of the same stuff happening, but you've got stand-ups and you've got a couple of ceremonies and more meetings that have been added on your plate without actual collaboration happening between teams. So why does it fail? I mean, look, we've all seen the surveys, we've all seen the reports, we've probably all heard about it. Like executive buying's big, got to have some good change management. We're using old tools. I don't really talk about this, but look, if you're using testing tools and source code management tools that were built 15 years ago, and you're using those to build technology of the future, like doesn't that sound wrong to you? Right? I mean, a lot of people are using HP, test suites, or they're using Subversion. All these tools were built, 10 to 15 years ago. And technology has completely changed in the last, every 2-3 years it changes quite drastically. In 15 years, it's been monumental changes, but yet we're still using old tools. QA and dev aren't working together. One of the big things we see most commonly within 3 months of any transformation that's not going well, it's testing and dev are acting like two separate teams. Dev does their work, then they hand it off to QA. They just do it every 2 weeks now instead of every 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks in waterfall, right? So they're still acting like waterfall. They're just doing it in a shorter cycle. So that's not really agility. Ops is leaving at the table, completely uninvolved. They're just like, look, we'll deal with ops later. And that's kind of a common thing. And then, people start looking at waterfall metrics. They go, well, what's my individual velocity per person? And I want to plan for each individual and how much capacity they have. And we get all kinds of, questions from folks around that. And you're like, and what you realize is because of the lack of visibility and metrics, and even though Agile preaches transparency and accountability, if not done well, you don't have that. And if you don't have that, then people look for other metrics. And they look for metrics that they're comfortable with, which is show me that everyone is working on stuff. And I want to be able to plan and make sure that all this work I have on my backlog, I can assign it to individuals, and I can measure how productive individuals are, which kind of gets away from our teams being productive. And then the last point I want to make is process and technology. And this is the one I want to focus on because this is a big one, right? There's, people come at problems from two angles. Either, hey, we need process to solve this problem, or we want to go buy a tool to solve this problem. And the truth is, the two are related. A process will not solve a problem by itself. And technology cannot solve a problem by itself. It's actually those two go hand in hand. You have to align your process with your technology, right? To me, technology enables and supports process and makes it stick and provides all the metrics and data you need to ensure that your process is running. Likewise, technology, having all the power and tools that do great things, but not having them configured so that they work seamlessly, so that that it's useful and that they produce the right information, that's also just as important. So thinking about those two things together, I think, is the most important piece that a lot of folks miss, a lot of organizations miss. And that's one of the big things we've been preaching, and we've had some really great successes of doing projects that are both process and technology together. So from our perspective, we believe software services must be a unique blend of people, process, and technology to support the overall effectiveness of software delivery. It is an interconnected world. You've got teams, you've got processes, you've got technology, they all have to align in order to build software, to build software well and to kind of achieve enterprise agility. And that's why we've been coining and talking about software services lifecycle management. And really the whole point of this is, it's an industry standard to talk about, look, a fragmented way, right now the industry is fragmented in how they roll out Agile, DevOps, and ALM initiatives. And most companies treat them as three separate things, funded by three different leaders and run by three different, managers. And the point is, this is one thing. When you think about this holistically, we think about, have a unified approach with how we, roll these items out and understand that they're all connected, and together, when connected and treated as one, you're going to drive business value. So that's really what we're kind of get to. It's teams, tools, processes, driving business value. And that ultimately is, one of the I would say the number one reason that Agile fails. If you have good alignment of teams, technology and process, you're going to get better reporting. You're going to have better visibility into the code that's being written, the code being built, the tests being run, the requirements being managed, the throughput of your teams, the items being released to production, the bugs coming out of those items released from production. If you have all those pieces connected together in a very seamless way, one, you'll have all the traceability and visibility you'll need. Second is you'll remove all the friction between teams and help foster collaboration across your distributed teams and organizations. And you'll truly get, you'll truly be able to, improve the efficiency and have that process stick, which I think is one of the big challenges, is getting processes to stick and having a way to actually ensure that we're being productive, that the teams are being productive and making progress. So when we talk about, SSLM or software services lifecycle management, there's really the five major tenets we think about. One is making sure we're aligning our business value with software services. That's why we're here. That's why we do what we do. It's end of the day, we're here to help drive business value, and aligning that together with how we engage these three initiatives, how we engage with consulting partners to drive this, or even internally how we plan our transformation, that we think about all three components, integrating our teams, processes, and technology, and all the services around that together, as opposed to, siloed, in terms of siloed with internal folks leading it, and also siloed with the partners and consulting vendors we use to drive this. Establish an SSLM advisor or director of SSLM to really kind of bring it all together. You need to have kind of one person that's got a holistic view that's responsible for the whole thing, as opposed to three people responsible for three different parts, and really there's no accountability. Make sure you have the right technical experts. It's hard to find good coaches with technology capability that understand it. It's hard to find good technology people with process understanding, but those are the people you want in your team helping you drive your transformation. We've spent a lot of time searching for those folks, a lot of time nurturing, mentoring, and developing those folks. They're out there. Those are the types of folks you want to help you drive this transformation successfully. And then create focused success metrics, right? Measuring, end of the day, anything we do, we cost money. We have to make sure we can show results. If we can set up the right type of metrics from the beginning and align our tools and processes so we can, so that we can actually track, capture, and monitor those metrics up front, and that's why having a holistic view is important, then you'll be able to demonstrate the success of the effort. So that was kind of a high level, why Agile fails, and kind of our view on the world, and what we see day in, day out, and from both what's worked and what hasn't. And I am going to turn this over now to Scott to kind of take it a layer deeper and talk a little more tactically about how that actually plays out. Over to you, Scott. I think you're on mute.
Thank you for reminding me of the mute, Zubin. Now if I can, there we go. So thank you. Now that Zubin has provided you the strategic background of the importance of Agile transformation and why it fails, I want to talk some about the key tactical challenges and how cPrime and Tasktop can overcome these challenges. My experience within organizations that have undergone a shift to Agile has been both as a stakeholder affected by and a change agent facilitating Agile transformation. As a stakeholder and a facilitator, I have noticed some recurring themes in this process. If we take a look at the benefits, the achievements that are realized in an Agile transformation, we normally see issues are exposed earlier in the development cycle, and we are now able to react effectively to constant change. Now, this is good news as it aligns with the fundamental Agile goal of solving long release cycles and breaking down complicated solutions into time-boxed deliverables. However, what I have also noticed time and time again is there are greater expectations, especially among the executive team, that are not realized. Some of these expectations, such as faster time to market, we find that in Agile transformation it still takes just as long, in some cases longer, to get a final product out the door. There's a misconception that because we're now nimble and we can react to changes that we should be able to deliver larger feature sets, which does not always happen. There is also this quality improvement misunderstanding of when we're finding issues and defects early in the process, they're not translating in the quality metrics as anticipated, because now we have a greater defect backlog, but we don't have any additional resources to burn that backlog down. And lastly, cost savings. Even though we've realized efficiencies, they're not translating to reduced effort and to reduced resource needs. Now, before we can start breaking this apart and understanding how we can meet these expectations, what we have to understand is what Agile transformation entails. First of all, Agile transformation is more than implementing Scrum team sprints and user stories. If we're simply changing how development works, which is all too often how many approach the shift to Agile, it's not enough. There are many stakeholders involved in the end-to-end process of delivering software. Therefore, it requires seamless integration across all teams involved in the software delivery lifecycle. But the good news is that doesn't mean the rest of the organization necessarily has to change how they work. So what you have to understand and what we'll focus on for the remainder of this presentation are concepts around integration, because the bottom line is you cannot scale Agile without integration. Without integration, you're going to continue to see cost overruns. You'll continue to see project failures. You'll continue to see delayed releases. Now, when we talk about integration, we're not just talking about integrating tools. We're also talking about connecting people and creating visibility and traceability across the software development lifecycle. Integration is just a means to facilitate seamless processes. As Zubin pointed out earlier, integration and processes go hand in hand. Now here you can see some of the domain areas that include stakeholders that are part of the Agile team, but they all work independently from the Agile team. Now there's a common philosophy in Agile that teams and stakeholders should be co-located in order to work effectively. But what many fail to understand is even if all the stakeholders are co-located, if they are working in disparate ALM tool stacks, your software lifecycle delivery resources might as well be globally dispersed. Ultimately, a breakdown in collaboration and a breakdown in visibility occurs if these stakeholders and tools they are working in are not integrated, which results in a siloed delivery process. Now here's an example of a software lifecycle architecture diagram. This is a tool that we use in Agile transformation to understand where the integration points and workflows exist. This helps us identify where breakdowns in the software development lifecycle will occur. In this diagram, we see an example of a disconnected ALM tool stack, the stakeholders involved, the tool sets that they're working in, and examples of assets and artifacts that are managed. Our approach to connecting the disconnected stakeholders and tool stack is to start identifying the integration points. And we define those integration points by understanding and documenting what we call software lifecycle integration patterns. Here you can see some of our common patterns that we run into. From portfolio project management patterns where there's a need to flow planning, time tracking, and budgeting information across all domain areas throughout the software development lifecycle, to ITSM, service management, where there's a need to create a feedback loop on issues and requests in order to eliminate the black hole perception where issues go in but they never come out, to the DevOps patterns, where we take continuous integration and continuous deployment to a new level. For example, automated testing, where there's a need when an automated test fails to initiate triggers to push a defect back to the source of truth and alert the Agile team that there is now a new backlog item that needs to be addressed. Now this is what a connected software lifecycle architecture diagram should look like, which each of these lines being representative of the SLI patterns that I just mentioned. And it's through these integration patterns that we can start building workflow processes between each of the domain areas and automate the workflow by effectively connecting each ALM tool through its artifacts. Now what I'd like to take time to focus on are a few of the specific SLI patterns and walk you through a typical scenario that is solved through integration. As we maneuver through this scenario, I want you to imagine what type of challenges would present themselves if integration did not exist. In this scenario, we're going to focus on the business analyst responsible for the requirements and the tester responsible for the defects, and how they interact as part of the Agile team while still working within their tool sets when the development team and the Scrum Master are working within Jira. And oh yeah, by the way, your business analyst is located in San Francisco, California. Your engineers and Scrum Master are in Austin, Texas, and your QA team is in the Czech Republic in Prague. As we walk through this scenario, you'll see how we address three of our software lifecycle integration patterns. We're going to look at requirements traceability, we'll look at test traceability, and we'll look at defect unification. We will show in this scenario the day in the life of each stakeholder and discuss how they work with their artifacts within their tool sets. We will also show how the other stakeholders are dependent upon one another, and hopefully you will see how without integration these processes and ways of working can be problematic. We'll start with the business analyst who spends his or her day creating and updating requirements to be fed to the development team and the Scrum Master and to populate the Jira requirements backlog. Once the business analyst has completed a requirement and it's approved and ready, through integration, we can automatically create an epic within the Jira backlog that is representative of that requirement. Now the Scrum Master can ensure it is prioritized appropriately within the backlog. Furthermore, we have now opened up a real-time line of communication so all stakeholders can collaborate and vet the requirement further. They can provide additional content without having to leave their tool of choice, and all updates, regardless of which tool, are synchronized in real time, alerting the other stakeholder. Now that the epic is prioritized and fully vetted, the development team can start decomposing the epic into user stories. Because of the connection we created between the business analyst requirement and the Scrum team's epic, not only is the business analyst alerted when there are updates to the epic, they are also alerted to when new artifacts are created as child or sibling artifacts. We refer to this as Artifact Relationship Management, or ARM for short. Now the BA can work with the Scrum team in collaborating on the user story, once again without leaving their tool of choice. And once all the requirements have been vetted by both the business analyst and those who are working in Jira, we can then alert the testing team by creating those same requirements in their test tool. This allows additional collaboration by involving new stakeholders working yet in another ALM tool. Now the test team has been provided the necessary information so they can begin creating their test cases and test run. And when they create these test cases and test run, they are then created within tasks within the Jira backlog so the Scrum Master and team can prioritize them and size them correctly. As the test cases and test runs are executed, defects are found. These defects are also synced to the Jira backlog, providing a full holistic picture of all the work involved in delivering the epic. Now each stakeholder has everything that they need to effectively do their job without leaving the tool that they work in and having to change the way they work. The tester has achieved defect unification and test traceability all the way back to the originating requirement. The business analyst has complete traceability across all tools of their requirement, how it's been decomposed, and where it is in its life cycle. The Scrum Master has effectively documented all work in their backlog so they can provide accurate burn down and velocity reports. So what has creating this seamless workflow of artifacts and assets gained us beyond making it easier on each of the stakeholders? Well, we've been able to automate flow across the value stream. We have expanded agility by allowing team members outside the team working in Jira to now be seamlessly integrated as if they were working in Jira from the same backlog. We've eliminated manual work. No longer do we have to do dual entry and track artifacts in multiple places. We've decreased cycle time. Reviews and collaboration can occur in real time within one's own tool environment without having to change the way they work. And through our increased visibility, you can now accurately track cycle time to understand where your efficiencies and deficiencies exist, thus maintaining the spirit of true continual process improvement. And last but not least, what every executive wants to hear, automated traceability, reporting and governance. So coming back to my first slide at the beginning of the presentation, through integration of these domain areas across the ALM tool stack, we can now start to scale Agile to meet the expectations not realized previously when simply just transforming Agile within the development team. The technology behind all this is Tasktop's Integration Hub. What makes Tasktop Integration Hub unique is that it is a bus architecture. Instead of traditional point-to-point integration that requires constant maintenance if tool versions or configuration changes, we have taken a completely different approach. We have created this bus architecture in which we have built business logic to handle all the use cases across the software development lifecycle. As you look at the diagram, you will notice the domain areas that we discussed earlier in the presentation. It is through the software lifecycle integration patterns that I mentioned and the identification of the workflows and the processes behind each of these patterns that allows us to apply and build the business logic into the domain areas, the ALM tools to be integrated, and the artifacts and assets to be managed. And it's through our Integration Hub technology and in concert with cPrime's relentless pursuit of process improvement that we're able to tie it all together, thus giving you a seamless, connected, automated software lifecycle delivery process. So with that, I will turn it back over to Sarah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Zubin, as well. If I wanted to remind you, if you have any questions, please type them in the GoToWebinar panel and the questions panel, and I will ask them of the presenters. We did have a couple come in while you were speaking. Let me pull those up. So I know you spoke a little bit about this already, Scott, but one of our questions was kind of how do you work with Agile teams that are where you have one that's offshore, right? If part of your, if your teams aren't co-located, how do you deal with that?
So we do have many clients where that does occur, and a lot of time, and there's a couple different approaches, but the most common approach that I've seen is this hub and spoke type of approach, where maybe you dedicate one of your instances. If you're working in Jira, you can actually integrate other Jira instances. So you can have a primary instance as your source of truth, and as your hub, and then you can integrate to all the other Agile teams, development teams that exist, even if they're not working in the same tool. If one Agile team's working in Jira and another team's in Rally and another team's in version 1, you can still achieve that hub and spoke type of scenario. That's one way of doing it, and you can even have what we call a multi-way integration, where you're literally pushing artifacts across all systems, whether it's linear, whether it's parallel. You can duplicate all those artifacts and have them flow from one team to another based off of specific triggers and events that you may want to configure. So we do run in that quite often, and the good news is there's multiple ways that we can handle it. One of the common things that, going back to the theme of process and technology, when I talk about the integration hub, we are process agnostic. So our goal is to work with a partner like cPrime, let them understand the process, map the process out, and then the tool simply facilitates it instead of dictating that process.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Zubin. I was going to ask if there is anything.
I was going to add some little color. I mean, just generally when you're dealing with offshore teams, and I don't think I've talked to an enterprise client in the last 2 years that doesn't have an offshore team. I would say that, obviously using Scrum Master proxies, product owner proxies that are local, I think leveraging a tool is absolutely critical for offshore, mostly because you just don't have visibility to what they're doing. And then also just to integrate the collaboration. So leveraging tools like persistent chat. HipChat is a fantastic tool so that, if you've got two teams that are working together or a team split between two locations, living in a HipChat tool where you can have persistent kind of conversation go on allows the team kind of coming online in the morning to be able to see what the team overnight was working on or working through, and then connecting your build tools into that or any kind of notification tools into that. So it's absolutely critical to have the tool integration and have that visibility so everyone is connected. Great.
Thank you. We had another question kind of as we're talking so deeply about tools, and they asked, well, isn't this all kind of putting putting tools in front of process, or putting process and tools in front of collaboration, which I think we all know is one of the tenets of Agile. So if you could maybe speak a little bit about that.
Let me jump on that first. So I think that in any tool implementation, the first thing we start with is actually process. It's you don't, if you're rolling out Jira, for example, you don't just go configure Jira and turn it on. We actually spend time understanding, well, what is the process, what is the workflow that we're trying to accomplish with the team, and then we make sure we align the tool with it, or that we kind of are optimizing the process to fit the tool, optimizing the tool to fit the process. And it is kind of a tool can't do 100% of what you want it to do. So you do have to find that, happy place where you get to 80-90% of what you want that gets you most productive and kind of seamless experience. So I don't think it's putting, the tool before the process. If anything, by having the tool, it helps you enforce the process, right? I mean, I think that's, at the end of the day, it's all about people before tools and processes. So tools and processes are actually seen as equal, not as one greater than the other. And I think that's the point. And the people aspect, I think that's where kind of the main issue is. There is 90% focus on people and 10%, or let me restate that, 95% focus on people and 5% focus on tools and process. And I think that's the biggest issue is, yes, people are more important than tools and processes, but not to the point where tools and processes aren't important at all. And I think that's the issue, right? You have to look, tools and processes are important, especially in a distributed world. Remember, when the Agile Manifesto was written 15 years ago, we didn't have the amount of outsourcing we have today. We didn't have technology that could help bridge the gap and create a seamless, kind of collaborative environment. It was a very different world in 2001 than we're in today. So keep in mind when that was written, it was a very different time. So I do think we are, when you're doing a tool implementation, process is important. Just like if you're rolling out Salesforce for a company, it's not about just turning on Salesforce. No, you've got to map the workflow of how your sales team operates or how your customer support team operates to how the tool can work, and you bring those two together. And it's the same thing with ERP projects and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I'll just add that in complete agreement with Zubin. If we're not facilitating collaboration, then we're not building the right processes and tools. So just echoing what Zubin had communicated there, the teams and the people, they come first. And whoever asked the question is absolutely correct. It's collaboration, the people, they come first. And all we're there to simply do is try to facilitate that way of working.
Right. So another kind of general Agile question. We have, to Zubin's comment about the great Agile coaches having both a tech and Agile background. What is your opinion of having Scrum Masters having a basic knowledge of programming and 1 year experience in Scrum and more than 10 years of experience in counseling and teaching?
So my general thoughts are, Scrum Masters need to at least be fluent in the tools that's being used to track the work, right? So whether it's Jira, Confluence, or other tools like that. And at the very least, they need to become experts in that tool, because that's a big part of their trade. It's not just about facilitating, but it's also making sure we have the right kind of metrics report, visibility, traceability, all those other things. It's nice if a Scrum Master understands technology so that they can ask smart questions, they can help point, person A to person C that may be able to solve a problem together. They can help moderate a, challenge and connect people. I think the important thing is that they're passionate about technology and they want to learn. And I'll say that when I've interviewed probably 1,000 project managers in my life, probably just as many Scrum Masters in my life, one of the important things when interviewing folks that I like to ask is, just even simple things like when you worked on a project, great, okay, so what technology do you use? And what were you rolling out? What versions of it? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, how did you work on a 6-month or 12-month project without knowing what technology you were implementing? Like, okay, so you ran Java. What was the Java Java server you were using? I don't know. And I think the point, and those are the wrong responses. The point is, if you're running a tech project or leading a technology team, you should try to understand what the heck they're doing. And you don't necessarily need to have a technical background. You just need to have an appetite for curiosity to learn and understand what all this stuff people are saying and the things you're doing. And if you're working with a team for a year or two, you should be pretty knowledgeable about the product. You should be knowledgeable about some of the technology they're using. I mean, there is so much information at your fingertips. It just takes a few minutes to go search for something. And, iteratively, you can learn a lot about technology just through that. So that, to me, is the more important quality, is that thirst for knowledge and then the aptitude to acquire kind of a higher level technical knowledge. You don't need to be an engineer to do that.
Thank you. Let's see. More on Agile in general. Do you have any recommendation for the amount and type of meetings that that you recommend to bring teams together?
I mean, look, the Scrum ceremonies out there are obviously a good guideline. I think the important thing is that we time box. The whole point of the Scrum ceremonies, whether it's daily stand-up, sprint review, retrospective, sprint demo, and backlog grooming, they're all great meetings. And the point of it is we need to be doing that on a regular basis. The amount of duration for those meetings, the important thing is that you have a fixed duration and you manage your time effectively, so you're not wasting people's time. It's that you have clear roles in those meetings, that you know who's leading it, you know the purpose of the meeting, and you're driving to an outcome, right? And I think that's the other thing. There's a lot of people go to a lot of meetings and they just don't get any outcome. And Scrum does a really good job of defining what outcome you want to get from meetings and the role that you play and the time you need to manage it. And that's basically just good meeting practice across any meeting. When adding meetings to schedules, one thing that organizations forget to do is they don't take anything off. So great, Agile introduces all these ceremonies, or set up all these meetings, but we're still going to the existing 20 meetings a week that we already had on our plate. So really you have to look at what meetings are you going to now and really try to say, how do I cut that in half? Let's start with getting rid of half of those meetings, and then let's keep iteratively trying to get rid of meetings. And I think that's the important part. The most important meetings that I would add to just the general Scrum stuff is the release planning meetings, every quarter. How do you get, when you have multiple teams working on initiative or epic or large kind of feature that spans multiple technologies, you do have to do some level of release planning. And so we see a lot of organizations coming together where you're bringing 5, 10 even together for a day or two to plan out the quarter and try to map all your dependencies. And that kind of, then you kind of have, so you kind of plan your dependencies, and then throughout the quarter you're going to have dependency management meetings. Some people call them scrum of scrums, some people call them different things, but essentially it's a meeting where you talk about the dependencies of the different scrum teams, and you can prioritize based on those dependencies.
Thank you. We had one person who kind of commented / questioned our Tasktop's kind of target audience, and saying that this seems a little bit heavyweight for small teams that are co-located. And I did want to confirm with you, yes, I mean, we generally, we feel that enterprise customers do have more of the issues that we address through this integration. Along the lines of kind of large enterprise Agile, we had another question that was, how does this kind of coexist and play with Agile Lean framework and SAFe to achieve enterprise scaling?
Yeah, I think it plays very well. A lot of what SAFe and Enterprise Agile or Lean Agile is talking about is it's really that full traceability, and it's just tying out. If you look at even just the SAFe big picture, in order to have kind of program and portfolio views, you need to have all your data aggregated in a consistent way, which means the tools that your teams are using need to all connect and roll up, right? And if you don't have and most organizations have a wide variety of tools, one, because they're all over the place, they've grown through acquisition, or just they haven't set a standard, right? And even if they've set a standard, it still takes years to roll that standard out. So you have organizations with a hybrid set of tools, and you need to aggregate all that data in order to get any kind of program or portfolio view, which is what any Agile scaling methodology will tell you need, right? So it's nice to have this great big picture, but if you can't actually roll up the work that teams are doing, then it's all for naught, right? Because you might plan at a portfolio level and roll that down to program and then push it down to teams. But if you can't see what the teams are doing and you can't roll that up to say, at the program level, we thought we're working on these 10 epics, but at the team level, we don't know what we actually got done and where we spent all of our time. The portfolio and program manager guys might be thinking that their resources are spending, 80% of their time on strategic initiatives that are coming from the top, when realistically they're only spending 20% of their time, but they don't even have the data to know that. And that's where you've got to really bring all this stuff together, all this data together to roll up. It's where you got to have DevOps so you can move quickly with automated builds, and good environments so you can quickly deploy and run hundreds and thousands of automation tests in parallel. This requires a huge technology transformation that goes underneath and supports the teams that no one really thinks about or talks about until they're a couple years into it and they realize we can't move fast because it takes us 5 days to build our application or to merge our code, and that's slowing us down on a 2-week sprint.
Sarah, I do want to circle back to what you stated before about a comment that this seems heavyweight for smaller teams. What we've presented here today is Agile transformation, large scale at the enterprise level. But the one thing I do want to point out is that for smaller teams that aren't looking to go to this enterprise level, notice one of the things in my earlier slide that I pointed out was scaling. So this is something that is scalable. Whether you're a small team that has a development group in one location that's working in one tool, and then maybe you just want to move defects back and forth between your QA team that's in a either different part of the building or a different location working in another tool. That's the thing that's great about what we're trying to communicate today. This is scalable. We can meet the needs of the smaller organizations without the heavy weight and the heavy lifting that's required to do this full-blown Agile transformation at the enterprise level.
Thanks, Scott. We did also have a couple of questions about the the integration scenario that you presented as well. One, let's see. So you linked tasks to tests, and so let's start with this one.
Okay.
We have a question about whether the integration enables changes to flow back up to the requirements from dev to test. So I think, we talked about it requirements going to test, but can they go both ways?
Yeah, we can. So in my scenario that I documented, I didn't show all the different integration patterns that could be involved there, or all of the movement of the artifacts. We have what we call inherent relationships, where you can get traceability from having connections at one level. But in that scenario where I had the test cases and the test results that were created in the tester's tool, I could actually simulate those and push them all the way back up to the business analyst in the requirements tool. So I can literally snapshot these artifacts across all the tool sets. Once again, it comes back to processes and workflow and how you want to disseminate this information across the different stakeholders and across the different tool sets. You notice that I call the test cases and the test results in JIRA, I call them tasks. Well, that's just representative of semantic alignment, that's the way that we wanted to represent those artifacts in the JIRA backlog. We didn't necessarily want to call them test cases and test results, but we can do that as well. So we can have both. We can have both a situation where I'm mirroring these artifacts in multiple tools, and then I pointed out also what we call artifact relationship management, where I can just manage the relationship of those artifacts to other entities and other assets as well. I hope that answers the question. Sarah, you said there was some additional question around that?
Right. So in the scenario you showed JIRA and a testing tool and a requirements tool. This particular attendee they don't have a requirements tool. They use JIRA and a test tool. Can you just explain if it's possible to do the integration without the requirements tool, kind of how those all work together?
Oh yeah, yes. And since I still have the slide deck, that was the one of the things that I wanted to point out in our bus architecture, in the technology level. It doesn't matter where the artifacts are, because the way that we build the logic into the technology is that the artifacts remain persistent across all the domain areas. So regardless if you're managing a requirement in a requirements tool or an agile management tool such as JIRA or a PPM tool, the logic remains. So I could still build my requirements in JIRA, and I can move those to any other tool set that I wanted to. That was just an example scenario of where I had a requirements management tool, but that's not a requirement. The bottom line is when you see this page here and you see all the different ALM tool vendors, we have a connector for each of these tool vendors, and if that tool allows us to manage a specific artifact type, such as a requirement, then the logic is in the base platform of our technology to be able to allow you to manage that information regardless of the tool set that you're working within.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. We have time for just a couple more questions. I'm afraid not everyone's going to get answered live, but we will follow up with you afterwards as well. So how do you address faster product delivery? Is there any changes that you would recommend to processes and technology that would facilitate that change?
Yeah, I'll start with, one of the biggest things I see, and then Scott, I'll let you go after, but I think one of the biggest things I see where, organizations want to get, faster throughput and product delivery is just, if you look at teams, there's a lot of lag time that's happening that people aren't aware of. So if a developer, I'll give you an example, if a developer writes code this morning, and let's say they start at 9 o'clock, and it's a small piece of code, and they get it done by noon, in most organizations, they can't actually build that code and give it to the tester until the next morning, because there's a nightly batch job that runs. In some places, that only happens twice a week. In some places, only once a week. In some places, every 2 weeks. So now as a developer, I've written code. It's done. I would love testers to test and give me feedback today while it's still fresh in my mind, but I can't do that. So I have to now, okay, well, I've checked it in. I'm going to wait for the build to happen. I'm going to go work on something else. And then what happens the next day, the tester starts working on it. They find a bug. They stop. and now you got to go back to the developer. The developer's like, crap, I'm working on something else. Let me stop doing that, figure out what's going on, fix it. Oh, and then I got to wait another day before I can get the build done. So these types of things are all there that people don't understand. Is developers have all this lag time. There's lag time between developing and QA because of the build tools, and that's really kind of comes back to good DevOps practices. Having good CI and CD, and having those in place. And often you don't have the right environments. If you've got teams running in parallel and features being developed, by different, two people working on one feature, another two people working on another feature, but you don't have a good branching and merging strategy, it's really messy and inefficient. And then even just architecting your applications differently and thinking about using microservices, so you're decoupling your application so it allows you kind of to develop significantly faster. I mean, that's where the market's going. That's what all the top tech companies like Netflix and Apple, all those guys are doing. They're really embracing, Facebook and Google. They've all embraced microservices. They've all embraced DevOps practices for all their internal development, testing, deployment, even how they architect applications. And it's a whole mind shift, and it's a big change. And that's kind of where I go back to. Look, we can teach you process, and we can help you prioritize your backlog, and help you understand what's the important order of doing things, and get teams to be a little more efficient by organizing them with the backlogs and kind of, But if we don't change the underlying technology, if we don't change the way to think about building applications and designing applications and giving them the tools to enable that automation, you have a ton of inefficiency that still exists, and that inefficiency ultimately is what is blocking organizations from really achieving the speed they want, that small companies just have, because it's just natural to them.
Yeah, and I cycled back to the software lifecycle architecture diagram that I showed earlier, where each one of these lines represents one of those integration patterns, which represents also a potential area of deficiency. So just supporting what Zubin was saying, it's creating these connections between these artifacts so that their cycle times are reduced. That is what helps the processes be more efficient and helps you get product out the door quicker. You don't necessarily, once again, you have to go across all the different areas, but you do need to identify the areas where you are seeing the deficiencies and implement the technology behind the processes to help facilitate that in a more efficient manner and reduce your cycle time.
Great, thank you. Well, I think that's all we have time for today, as Scott is showing right now. If you'd like to learn more about SSLM or cPrime, you can go to the link that is listed right there. Some of you asked to see Tasktop's product in action, to do a live demo. We didn't have time to do that today, but you can always go to that website there, and we can get you signed up for a demo. And if you have any other questions, you can go to contact us. And I wanted to say again, thank you, Zubin and Scott, and thank you all attendees.